I'm sitting in the emergency room holding my wife Sarah's hand as it trembles against mine. Her lips are still swollen, her breathing ragged even after the EpiPen. The fluorescent lights above us feel too bright, too harsh for what just happened. We were supposed to be having a simple family dinner, a welcome celebration for Sarah to finally feel like part of my family. Instead, what they did nearly killed her. And the worst part, they thought it was hilarious. When I heard my own mother laughing as my wife gasped for air, I knew my life would never be the same. Before I tell you what happened that night, I need to know I am not alone in this. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. If you think families should protect each other, not hurt each other, hit that like button. And subscribe because this story gets darker before it gets better. Trust me, you will want to hear how I handled what came next. I met Sarah 3 years ago at a coffee shop in Portland. She was reading a book at a corner table, sunlight streaming through the window and catching the auburn highlights in her long brown hair. I still remember how she looked up when I accidentally bumped her table, how her warm smile made my apology stumble over itself. She was a kindergarten teacher, 27 years old, with this genuine love for children that shone through every story she told. At 5'5", she had this quiet presence that somehow filled every room she entered. But there was something critical about Sarah that I learned on our third date. We were at a seafood restaurant, and when the waiter started listing specials, she stopped him immediately. She explained calmly but firmly that she had a severe shellfish allergy. Not the kind where you get a little rash. The kind where your throat closes, your airways constrict, and you have minutes before you die. Anaphylaxis, the doctor called it. She always carried 2 EpiPens everywhere she went, kept them in her purse like some people keep their keys. She was careful, so careful, always asking about ingredients, always checking labels. I fell in love with everything about her. Her patience with her students, the way she laughed at terrible jokes, how she cried during animated movies. 2 years after that coffee shop meeting, I proposed to her on a beach at sunset, and she said yes before I even finished the question. We had a small, intimate wedding 6 months ago, just close friends and a few family members. We moved into a cozy apartment in the suburbs, the kind with a little balcony where we drank coffee on Sunday mornings. We talked about our future, about maybe having kids someday, about growing old together. Sarah desperately wanted to be accepted by my family. She asked about them, constantly remembered every detail I shared, always encouraged me to call my mom more often. And I had told them about her allergy. God, I had told them so many times. I sat my mother Patricia down and explained it was not just a preference or a minor inconvenience. This was life or death. I told my older brother Tyler. I told my younger sister Brooke. I made it crystal clear that shellfish could kill Sarah within minutes. My mother nodded, patted my hand, and said she understood completely. Brooke asked thoughtful questions about cross-contamination and seemed genuinely concerned about keeping Sarah safe. Tyler just shrugged and said he got it. I thought they understood. I thought they cared. 6 months after the wedding, my mother called me. Her voice was bright, enthusiastic in a way that made me smile. She said she felt terrible that she had not properly welcomed Sarah into the family yet, that between the wedding chaos and everyone's schedules, there had not been a real moment to celebrate. She wanted to host a family dinner, nothing fancy, just us, just the people who mattered most. I felt this warmth spread through my chest. Finally, my mother was reaching out to Sarah, making an effort to build that relationship. Sarah was overjoyed when I told her. She spent 2 days trying to decide what to wear, what to bring, how to make the best impression. She even offered to make a salad to help out, but my mother insisted we come empty-handed. She said Sarah was the guest of honor, that she had everything covered. The day before the dinner, Tyler called me. He asked if we were still coming, mentioned that Mom had been cooking all day. There was something in his voice, something I could not quite place, a kind of anticipation that seemed odd for a simple family dinner. But I brushed it off. Maybe he was just excited to see us. Brooke sent a text message with the smiley face emoji saying she could not wait. Everything seemed normal, warm, welcoming. We arrived at my mother's house at 6:30 in the evening. She lived in a quiet neighborhood in Seattle, a 2-story house, painted white with flower beds lining the front walk. Sarah carried a bottle of wine we had picked out together, and I had a bouquet of flowers. When my mother opened the door, she pulled Sarah into a tight hug, holding her for several seconds. She told Sarah how glad she was that she was there, how she had been looking forward to this all week. The warmth in her voice seemed so genuine. Tyler and his girlfriend Jenna were already there, sitting in the living room. They stood to greet us, shook hands, made small talk about work and the weather. Brooke and her husband Marcus arrived a few minutes later, apologizing for traffic. Everyone gathered in the living room, and my mother brought out fresh lemonade. She handed a glass to Sarah and mentioned that she remembered Sarah saying she liked it fresh squeezed. Sarah looked at me with this touched expression, squeezing my hand. She whispered that my mother was so thoughtful, so sweet. I felt proud. This was what I had wanted. My wife and my family finally connecting. My mother led us into the dining room where the table was set beautifully. Candles flickered between small vases of fresh flowers. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air. Patricia announced the menu with obvious pride: roasted chicken mashed potatoes with garlic green beans with almonds, and a special pasta dish with creamy sauce that she had spent hours perfecting. I asked the question I always asked. I needed to be sure. I looked at my mother and confirmed that everything was safe, that there was no shellfish, no cross-contamination. She smiled at me like I was being overly cautious, but she reassured me. She said she had been extra careful, had even used separate cutting boards and utensils. She knew how serious this was. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, leaned close, and whispered that my mom was being so sweet about everything. We sat down. Patricia brought out the dishes one by one, setting them in the center of the table. Everyone started serving themselves, passing bowls and platters, the conversation flowing easily. Tyler talked about a project at work. Brooke shared a funny story about their dog. Jenna asked Sarah about teaching, and they bonded over childhood education philosophies. Marcus was quiet but friendly, nodding along. Everything felt perfect, normal, safe. Then I noticed something. Tyler and Brooke kept glancing at each other, little looks, quick smiles like they were sharing a private joke. I caught Tyler's eye and asked what was so funny. He shook his head, said nothing, claimed he was just happy to have everyone together. But the look did not disappear. Brooke bit her lip like she was trying not to laugh. A cold feeling started creeping up my spine. My mother placed the pasta dish in front of Sarah, encouraged her to try it. She said she had made it especially creamy, exactly how she thought Sarah would like it. Sarah smiled, thanked her, and scooped a generous portion onto her plate. The pasta was fettuccine, with what looked like a white cream sauce flecked with herbs and cheese. Sarah twirled some pasta onto her fork and took a bite. Everyone at the table seemed to pause. Patricia was watching. Tyler was watching. Brooke was watching. Even Jenna seemed frozen her fork halfway to her mouth. I asked why everyone was staring. The question came out sharper than I intended, my instinct screaming that something was wrong. Patricia laughed it off, said they just wanted to see if Sarah liked the sauce. Sarah took a second bite, chewed, swallowed. Then she stopped. Her hand went to her throat. She set down her fork, and I saw her face change. The color drained, then flushed red. She looked at me, and I will never forget the fear in her eyes. She said my name, then told me something was wrong. Patricia and Tyler exchanged a glance, and they started giggling. Sarah's breathing changed in seconds. She touched her throat again, her voice becoming strained as she told me it was itching, swelling. I shot to my feet, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I shouted her name, asking what was happening, but I already knew. I already knew. Her lips began to swell before my eyes. Her cheeks flushed bright red hives spreading across her skin like wildfire. Her hands were shaking as she tried to speak, tried to tell me she could not breathe properly. The sound of her voice, tight and panicked, cut through me like glass. I grabbed her purse from where she had set it on the floor, dumping the contents across the table. Wallet, keys, tissues, everything scattered. I found the EpiPen case and ripped it open, my own hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. Sarah was wheezing now, her hand clutching at her collar trying to get air. And that is when I heard it. Tyler laughing. Actually laughing a full genuine laugh. He pointed at Sarah and said her face was turning red like a tomato. Brooke joined in her giggles, becoming full laughter. She said she had told them Sarah would freak out. I looked at my mother. Patricia had her hand over her mouth, but she was not horrified. She was laughing. Her eyes were bright with amusement as she watched my wife struggle to breathe. She said she could not believe it was actually working, that the shrimp paste really did the trick. Everything stopped. My blood turned to ice. I stared at her, unable to process the words. Shrimp paste. She said shrimp paste. I screamed at her, asking what she had done. My voice broke, came out raw and desperate. Patricia was still smiling, telling me to relax, that it was just a little prank. She said they wanted to see if Sarah was really allergic or just being dramatic for attention. Tyler nodded, agreed enthusiastically. He said half the people who claim allergies are faking it, that they just wanted to test it out. His tone was casual, like he was discussing the weather. I could not breathe. I could not think. My wife was dying in front of me and my family was laughing. I pulled the cap off the EpiPen, positioned it against Sarah's thigh through her pants, and pushed. The click and hiss as the needle deployed made Sarah gasp and jerk. Tears were streaming down her face. Her breathing was still labored, wheezing, but the epinephrine was starting to work. I told her to stay with me, to keep breathing. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. I told the operator my wife was having anaphylactic shock, that she had been poisoned with shellfish, that we needed an ambulance immediately. I gave them the address, my voice breaking over every word. Sarah collapsed back in the chair, and I moved her to the floor, keeping her airway open like I had learned in a first aid class years ago. I held her, told her over and over that help was coming, that she was going to be okay. Her lips were grotesquely swollen, her eyes red and watering. She was crying, terrified, barely able to draw breath past her constricted throat. And my family was still talking, still making excuses. Patricia said they had not thought it would be this bad, that they only put a tiny bit of shrimp paste in the sauce. Her tone was defensive, now annoyed that I was making such a big deal. Tyler told me to chill out. Said Sarah would be fine because I had already given her the pen thing. Brooke chimed in that they just wanted to test if the allergy was real, that so many people lie about allergies these days. Marcus Brooke's husband stood in the corner looking at the floor. He said nothing. Jenna Tyler's girlfriend had gone pale, but she also stayed silent. I lost it. I yelled at them that they had poisoned my wife, that they could have killed her. My voice echoed through the house, shaking with rage and terror. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. She said not to be so dramatic, that it was just a little allergic reaction. Just a little reaction. Like Sarah was not lying on the floor unable to breathe. I was on my knees holding Sarah, and I screamed that she could not breathe, that she could die. Tyler looked almost bored. He pointed out that she was not dying, was she? He said we could see she was being a drama queen, just like they thought. Sarah tried to speak. Her voice was so weak, raspy, and broken. She said, "My name told me she was scared. I promised her she would be okay, that the ambulance was coming." I kept my hand on her chest, feeling each labored breath, praying she would keep breathing until help arrived. Patricia shook her head. She actually shook her head and said that because Sarah was talking, she was clearly fine. She said I was overreacting. That is when it hit me. The full weight of what had happened. This was not an accident. This was not a mistake. My family had deliberately, intentionally poisoned my wife. They had planned this. They had put shellfish in her food, knowing it could kill her. And now, watching her suffer, they felt no remorse. They thought this was funny. They thought she was faking, even as her body fought for survival. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes, but it felt like hours. Paramedics rushed in with equipment, asking rapid-fire questions. They checked Sarah's vitals, noting her blood pressure was dangerously low and her heart rate was elevated. They gave her oxygen through a mask and started an IV line. They confirmed I had administered the EpiPen correctly, told me it likely saved her life. They lifted Sarah onto a stretcher. I followed, grabbing her purse and my jacket. Before I walked out the door, I turned back to look at my family one last time. Patricia called after me, told me to call when we got to the hospital so they would know Sarah was okay. Her voice still had that bright, casual tone, like this was a normal evening that had gotten slightly out of hand. Tyler actually waved at me. He said to tell Sarah they were sorry if they scared her, but he was smiling when he said it. Smiling. I looked at each of them, my mother, my brother, my sister, people I had loved my entire life, people I thought I knew. I said 3 words, "Do not call me." Then I climbed into the ambulance with my wife. At the hospital, they rushed Sarah into an emergency bay. Doctors and nurses swarmed around her, checking vitals, administering medications, monitoring her breathing. I stood against the wall, trying to stay out of the way, watching them work to save the woman I loved. A doctor came to speak with me after 30 minutes that felt like days. He said Sarah was stabilizing, that her vitals were improving, but it had been close. If I had waited even 2 more minutes to use the EpiPen, we might be having a very different conversation. His words were professional, but his eyes were kind. He could see I was barely holding myself together. I sat down in a plastic chair and started shaking. I could not stop. My wife had almost died. Because of my family. Because of a prank. My phone buzzed. Patricia calling. Then Tyler. Then Brooke. Text messages started flooding in. Patricia asking if Sarah was okay, saying they were really sorry if they went too far. Tyler sending a message that Mom felt bad, that they had not meant to make such a big deal out of it. Brooke asking if Sarah was all right, saying it was just supposed to be funny. I turned off my phone. A nurse led me to Sarah's room in the emergency department. She was lying in a hospital bed, oxygen cannula in her nose, IV in her arm. Her face was still swollen, but less than before. She was sleeping exhausted from the trauma her body had endured. I sat in the chair beside her bed. I took her hand, gently, careful of the IV line. And I made a decision right there in that sterile hospital room with the sound of monitors beeping steadily. I was done. I was done with all of them. Sarah woke a few hours later, around 2 in the morning. I had not slept, had not even closed my eyes. I was still sitting beside her, still holding her hand. When her eyes opened and found mine, she said my name in a hoarse whisper. I leaned close, told her I was right there. She started crying, tears sliding down her still puffy cheeks. She said she had thought she was going to die. I held her hand with both of mine and told her how sorry I was. I said it over and over, knowing it could never be enough. She asked the question I had been dreading. Did they do it on purpose? Her voice broke on the words. I could not lie to her. I told her yes. They had wanted to test if her allergy was real. Sarah looked at me with such confusion, such hurt. She asked why I said she had never done anything to them. I had no answer. I still do not have an answer. A doctor came in to check on her. He reviewed her charts, listened to her breathing, seemed satisfied with her progress. Then he said they were keeping her overnight for observation, that the reaction had been severe enough to warrant monitoring. Sarah nodded weakly. The doctor looked at me with a serious expression. He said he had to ask whether this was accidental exposure or intentional. I told him the truth. I said my family had put shrimp paste in her food on purpose. The doctor's face hardened. He said that was poisoning, that we should consider reporting it to the police. After he left, I sat there thinking. Report my own family to the police. They were my mother, my brother, my sister, people I had known my entire life, but they had tried to kill my wife. They had watched her stop breathing and laughed. They felt no guilt, no remorse. What kind of people do? That morning came. Sarah was sleeping again, the hospital having given her something to help her rest. I was dozing in the chair when I heard voices in the hallway. Familiar voices. My stomach dropped. The door opened. Patricia walked in, carrying a vase of flowers. Tyler followed with a bag of fruit. Brooke brought a card. They were smiling. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly. I demanded to know what they were doing there. Patricia looked surprised by my tone. She said they had come to see how Sarah was doing, that they brought gifts. Sarah woke at the noise. She saw them and shrank back against the pillows, her eyes wide with fear. Her hand reached for mine, trembling. She said my name in a small, frightened voice. I stepped between her and my family. I told them to get out. My voice was low, dangerous. Patricia looked confused, playing innocent. She said they came to apologize. Could I not see that I asked if she seriously thought flowers fixed almost killing someone? Brooke stepped forward, irritation creeping into her voice. She said they already said they were sorry. What more did I want? Then Tyler said the words that destroyed whatever tiny thread of connection might have remained. He said Sarah was fine, told me to look at her. She was awake and talking. He told me to stop acting like they had committed murder or something. Patricia agreed immediately. She said it was just a prank that went a little too far, that Sarah was young and healthy and bounced back fine. Brooke crossed her arms and said honestly, if we could not take a joke, that was our problem. Something snapped inside me. I roared at them to get out. Patricia tried to speak, started to say, I was being ridiculous, but I cut her off. I told them I said, "Get out," that they had poisoned my wife, laughed while she was dying, and still did not think they had done anything wrong. A nurse heard the shouting and came in, told me to keep my voice down or she would have to ask my visitors to leave. I said they were leaving right now. Patricia tried again to speak, calling me honey, begging me to please listen. I gave them an ultimatum. Leave in 10 seconds, or I would call security and the police. They left. But as they walked out, I heard Patricia whisper to Tyler and Brooke that I would calm down, that I was just stressed. Tyler agreed, said to give me a few days and I would get over it. Brooke added that Sarah was probably the one making me act this way, turning me against them. I heard every word, and I knew what I had to do. After they left, Sarah was crying again. She apologized, said she was causing problems between me and my family. I sat on the edge of her bed and took her hand. I told her not to dare apologize, that this was not her fault. She said they were my family. I looked at her swollen face at the fear still lingering in her eyes, and I told her she was my family. She was my wife, and they had tried to kill her. I made phone calls. First, I called my friend Greg, who is a lawyer. I explained what happened, every detail. He was silent for a long moment after I finished, then said what my family did was assault, potentially attempted murder, if we could prove intent. I told him I could prove it, that they had admitted it was a prank to test if the allergy was real. Greg told me to get the hospital to document everything, to file a police report, and to consider a restraining order. I spoke with Sarah's doctor and the nurses. I asked them to document fully that Sarah had been deliberately poisoned with shellfish. They agreed, said they would note everything in her medical records. The doctor said he would testify if needed. I called the police. An officer came to the hospital, took my statement, took Sarah's statement. I gave him names and addresses. The officer said they would investigate, that what my family did was a crime. Then I did the hardest thing. I typed out a message and sent it to a group chat with Patricia, Tyler, and Brooke. I told them what they did was not a prank. It was poisoning. It was assault. Sarah could have died. I had filed a police report. I had contacted a lawyer. If any of them ever contacted me, Sarah, or came near us again, I would pursue criminal charges and a restraining order. We were done. Do not call. Do not text. Do not visit. They were dead to me. I blocked all their numbers, blocked them on every social media platform, cut every connection. Patricia tried calling from a different number an hour later. I answered only to tell her we were finished. She said I could not be serious, that they were my family. I told her family does not try to kill each other. Then I hung up and blocked that number too. Text messages came from other numbers they must have borrowed. Tyler saying I was seriously calling the cops on my own family over this. Brooke saying I would regret this, that blood is thicker than water. Patricia saying how dare I treat my mother this way after everything she had done for me. I did not respond to any of them. I did not waver. Sarah was released from the hospital 2 days later. We went home to our apartment and I helped her to the couch, brought her tea, made sure she was comfortable. She looked at me with exhausted eyes and asked if I was sure about cutting them off completely. I told her I had never been more sure of anything in my life. They had shown me who they really were, and I believed them. Sarah started crying and pulled me into a hug. She thanked me for choosing her. I held her tight and promised I would always choose her. Always. The months that followed were not easy. Sarah was discharged with instructions to rest, and to follow up with her allergist. But the physical healing was only part of it. She developed anxiety around eating, especially around other people. She would stare at her plate, asking me over and over if I was sure the food was safe. She had nightmares about not being able to breathe, would wake up gasping, reaching for her EpiPen. We went to therapy together. A counselor who specialized in trauma helped Sarah work through what had happened. Slowly, meal by meal, she started to trust food again. Started to trust that she was safe. I did not regret my decision. Not for 1 second. But there were moments when I thought about my family. Not because I missed them, but because I mourned what should have been. I mourned the family I thought I had, the mother who should have protected my wife instead of hurting her. The police investigation moved forward. Officers interviewed Patricia Tyler and Brooke. All three admitted to the prank, but insisted they had not meant any real harm, that they genuinely thought Sarah was exaggerating her allergy. The district attorney reviewed the case. In the end, Sarah made the decision not to pursue criminal charges. She did not want me to have to testify against my own family in court, did not want to drag it out. But I did file for a restraining order, and the judge granted it. My family was legally required to stay away from us. Sarah and I decided we needed a fresh start. We moved to a different city, back to Portland, where we had first met. Found new jobs, made new friends. We built a life that felt safe, that felt like ours. We found peace. Sarah returned to teaching, found joy again in her kindergarten classroom. I threw myself into my work. We went on dates, took weekend trips, started talking about the future again. We surrounded ourselves with people who actually cared about us, who would never dream of hurting us as a joke. Those friends became our real family. Patricia tried to reach out a few times over the first year. Letters arrived in the mail with her handwriting on the envelope. I returned them unopened. Eventually, they stopped coming. I think about them sometimes, usually late at night when I cannot sleep. I wonder if they ever understood what they did, if they ever felt genuine remorse. I doubt it. People like that rarely change. They convince themselves they were the victims, that I was the one being unreasonable. But here is what I learned through all of this. Family is not about blood. It is not about who you share DNA with or who raised you. Real family are the people who protect you, who would never deliberately hurt you. Real family feels remorse when they cause you pain, not amusement. Real family does not laugh when you are dying. I learned that sometimes the strongest, most loving thing you can do is walk away. To choose your own peace, your own safety, your own spouse over people who do not deserve your loyalty. There is no honor in staying connected to people who would rather test your boundaries than respect them, who would rather prove you wrong than keep you safe. I do not hate my mother, my brother, or my sister. Hate takes too much energy, and they do not deserve any more of my time or emotion. I simply accept the truth of who they are, and I choose not to have them in my life. That is not cruelty. That is self-preservation. Sarah and I are happy now, truly happy. We have built something real and good from the ashes of that terrible night. We have friends who feel more like siblings than my actual siblings ever did. We have created traditions of our own, found joy in the simple things, learned to trust again. People ask me sometimes if I regret cutting off my family. I tell them this. I do not regret protecting my wife. I do not regret choosing love over blood. And I do not regret walking away from people who thought watching someone die was funny. Because at the end of the day, the family you choose is sometimes stronger than the family you are born into. And I chose right. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between family and doing what was right? Have you ever had to walk away from people you loved because they could not see the harm they were causing? Drop your story in the comments below. I want to hear from you because I know I am not the only one who has been through something like this. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because I share real stories about real struggles, and maybe your story could be next. And please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who is struggling with toxic family dynamics and needs to know it is okay to choose themselves. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me through the hardest moment of my life. I hope wherever you are, whatever you are facing, you find the courage to choose the people who truly love you. Stay strong, stay safe, and remember that you deserve to be protected, not tested.